Welcome to Soul Unscripted. This is the space where spirituality meets strategy and soul-led entrepreneurs come to remember who they are, why they're here, and what they're truly capable of creating. So I'm your host, Lindsay. I'm a soul purpose mentor, intuitive business coach, and Akashic guide. And I'm here to help you bridge that energetic with the practical so you can build a business that feels as good as it looks. Each week, um, each episode, we dive into the real, raw, and unscripted side of entrepreneurship. It's about the initiations, the breakthroughs, and the magic and the mess, all through the lens of alignment, purpose, and truth. Because when you lead from your soul, you don't just build a business, you actually become the embodiment of your purpose. So take a breath, open your heart, and let's get into today's episode. I am really excited actually for this one. So today's guest is Samantha Fackler, and I'm going to hand it over to her because I'm going to let her get into everything that she is all about. But I just know that this conversation today is going to go deep and be extremely helpful for so many of you out there because what she embodies is just incredible. So, welcome, Samantha.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm happy to be here.
So, why don't you share? I want to say share a little bit about yourself. You don't have to do it in the traditional way because honestly, like you've got just such an incredible kind of path and journey that you've taken that I feel like that's gotten you here, that you bring a whole other level of help to the spiritual business world.
Yeah, I know. It's always tough to figure out where to start, but I think for me, I spent over 13 years in the brand and marketing space. I've worked with massive companies like Jameson Whiskey, Absolute Vodka, Adobe, LinkedIn, Intuit, a lot of high growth startups, especially in the tech space. And across this journey, I had kind of this parallel life outside of work where I was exploring meditation, spirituality. And I had this wake up call around 2020. I had already known that I had several intuitive gifts, but I basically had this moment, October 2020, exactly 5 years ago, that there was more. And I'm going to pause for one moment, if you don't mind, and let my dog out because she's whining.
No problem.
Okay. And we're back. So at this time, to paint the picture, I was in a marketing role where I was running full scale teams for different clients at an agency. It was very full on. And at the same time, I had this kind of second or third, I don't know what number it was at this point, but spiritual awakening where more psychic gifts came online. And I felt this really strong pull to work with women in a coaching capacity. Now, it just so happens that the marketing agency I was working for asked me to coach the CEOs that we were working with. And I thought, oh, wow, this feels really aligned. So that was actually my foray into coaching. And then I got to a point where I burnt out, and that was my end of my corporate career because I decided burnout is not worth it. It burns us out to such a crisp. It prevents us from doing the work we're meant to do here. And that was the moment that I dedicated myself to this work with women that I felt called to. And I really work with women creatives, business owners, creators. I mean, anyone who kind of has a public facing role, which nowadays is so many different people with personal brands and brands. And I mesh this intuitive kind of psychic side with the brand and marketing side. But there's something even bigger, I think, that's coming through. And what I find is interesting about this, as I'm sure you've experienced and many of our listeners have experienced, is that there are tests over time that come up that, kind of give us a fork in the road. And it's like, do you want to continue down this purpose path, or do you want to take this detour, this other route? And so it's been hard to say no to those detours and stay committed to my purpose. But it's also been the most freedom and like flexible type of path I could have ever found.
Yeah. Okay. So I can totally relate. And I actually find I've started to realize now. So I've been an entrepreneur myself for 25 years.
Wow.
And I've owned a number of different businesses in that time, product-based, service-based, in-person, online. So I've kind of a lot of experience in a lot of different ways. And those forks, those things that maybe throw you off your path, or you look at it like they throw you off your path. What I've started to realize, and especially now, when I've kind of focused the last 5, 6 years, my business has been focused a lot more on energetics and that alignment side of the strategy pushing old school business side. And those detours, they're part to help you, I find, not only get further into who you are and what you do, like your divine self-expression, even if it seems like it's pulling you off your purpose, it's actually almost rerouting you back onto it in a different way. And it just brings something to it that when you're helping other people, you are doing it from that embodied state. Like you've actually done that. You've been there, right? So you've done the detours. You feel like, and stuff. And so when you're supporting other people, because it does seem a part of it. Like once we kind of go more into that intuitive, energetics, spiritual side of entrepreneurship, um, it seems like we do get a lot more of this kind of push and pull of this way. As I say, kind of a little bit of the old school way, but also too being pulled into things. Like I know I found this myself. Sometimes it's getting pulled into things that I think might be helpful, but they're actually not. And I always say too, part of that is really so that I can, have been where other people and say, like, I get it. And also to maybe see where somebody else is doing that same thing. And now I do. Like, whether it's clients or just people, I'll notice or whatever and think to myself, you're like, I can see what's going on because I've been there and I've already walked that path. So I always say, like, we can just bring a whole other layer of helping others by the fumbles, by the detours, by even in some cases like getting a little bit off the proper path. But again, I always tell people like alignment, you think of like GPS, right? And we pretty much all have it in our car. And if we don't, we use our phone for it and everything like that. So you put in a route and that's the route, right? But for whatever reason, maybe you miss your turn. And so then it'll detour you, right? You'll ultimately get to where you're going, but maybe it just takes you a little bit longer. But maybe it ends up being a beautiful scenic route where part of the experiences within that route are just meant to make you see more. Or, I mean, maybe you just end up on a beautiful different path, but you still ultimately get to that place where you were going. That's what I try at least to do. I've had where jumped into some higher level business stuff, a year long high level mastermind being this is going to change my business and who I am. And it actually completely pulled me off the wrong path, like
Yeah,
completely.
I've experienced that too.
Yeah. I think a lot of us, sadly, it seems to be a theme that a lot of us have. And I looked at it and for myself, I'm like, this is like my background is business. Like I should have known better. Right? I went through all those stages of like grief and shame and guilt and what was I thinking, beating myself up a little bit. Thankfully, I didn't stay there for too long because I just realized that again, like part of that was just part of what I was supposed to go down, like part of my journey. It seems kind of cliche to say, but I think the truth is like we experience things for the greater good, whether it's the greater good for ourselves in our life and our business, or it's the greater good of more of the collective.
Yeah, I think there are two different types of detours. Ones that I speak to, and when I really do visualize them as forks in the road. And I think There are many that I've stumbled upon that were really tough decisions. And I think there are forks that we say no to, and there are forks that we say yes to. And the forks that we say yes to that end up being a detour, and then we end up back on this path. Obviously, there's a lesson there, right? So saying yes to a high level mastermind when it didn't change your life, there's a lesson there, right? And there's something that I think is related to the ego when we say yes to a fork and there's a lesson. And that means there's something around fear, or there's something in our psychological framework that we're meant to explore and learn from. And then ultimately, we return back to this purpose driven path. The forks that we say no to are equally powerful in my experience. And I think the few that I've said no to were massive opportunities, like 7-figure opportunities that I said no to when my business at the time was not making 6 figures yet. And I knew that I was probably crazy for doing this. And I didn't talk to like my family about this because I knew what they were going to say. But saying no to that deepened my path and then drew even better opportunities coming through that I knew were more long lasting. And I guess to give you an example of that, that 7-figure one was someone who came to me who is an investor who is behind many very famous, very successful marketing agencies. And he said, "Hey, there's this specific market. I already know that you're a marketing whiz in this specific market of tech. I have clients lined up. I want to create a specific agency for this market because it doesn't exist. Would you run this? I'll help you fund the beginning and we can basically be co-founders." That was so massive because the clientele that was lined up in the pipeline for this were huge companies. And we're talking about not just a 7-figure offer, but me earning at least $1 million a year as this agency owner and knowing who I would even employ because of where I was at the time. So saying no to that was very difficult, as you can imagine, because I was in my first year of business, but it was a test. And saying no to that actually drew better, more aligned clients to me, deepened my commitment to my coaching practice, deepened my like commitment to my spiritual life and energetics and intuition. And I think looking at it now, a few years later, I'm so happy I did that because I knew that if I took that detour, I would crash and burn and I would end up back at square one at some point because based on what I want in my life, that's just not aligned. So I think if you are listening and you're coming upon a detour, see like, is this a really tempting thing that maybe my fear is wanting to explore, my ego is attracted to, but then what feels like really true? And sometimes that's a tough call to make.
Yeah, it sure is. And you're right about, so as women especially, like we fear is quite often it's that type of thing that does hold us back. So I have an interesting example, and this is going way back before I even began entrepreneurship. So it's what I went to school for. So college for, it was called small business back then because now it's entrepreneurship, small bit. I don't know. Entrepreneurship that we're talking, I'm going to age myself here, but we're talking the mid 90s. So entrepreneurship wasn't a word that was used at all. But anyways, it's what I did, but I was not confident to like start my own business at that point. So I went and got a bunch of jobs and ended up working for actually an accountant, fairly local to me, running their office, all the things. And he was like, because the first week, I mean, so funny through my human design, all the things. Like my main sun gate is 3, which is order from chaos. And I went in, overhauled their entire, filing system. Like it was a disaster. It was just, I was like, there's no way I can work like this. So, and I remember him coming in one day and then his wife coming and going, how did you do this? Like, and do it so quickly? Because the woman who had been there for, I think, 10 years or whatever, like it was, so I was like, I just did it. Like I didn't even, it just was easy because again, that's like my gift. I can see that. It's like the chaos. And I'm like, okay, let's just take order. So he kept seeing these bits in me. He saw the parts of me that I knew were there, but I didn't trust in myself, again, to like start my own business. So over time, he started having me do more client work and he actually started sending me to his clients and he had me like setting up their systems and doing all of these things for them. And he kept trying to encourage me to start my business. And I was like, no, nope, nope, nope. So resistant to it. And so he kept pushing, and then he finally was like, well, we're retiring and we're moving, 2 hours away. So they gave me plenty of leeway, and so he's like, you're gonna, and I was like, no. And ironically, a job that I had applied for the year and a half prior to starting at this accounting firm, they contacted me. And it was like, and I really wanted to get into this company. It was a big corporation. It was the first time I was going to work for a larger company. And so I was like, yay, this is so perfect, so divinely guided. I'm going to take that job. And I ended up working there for 2.5 years. And I learned so much because I stepped into so much that I never would have expected. I was just basically coming in an administrative type role. And within the first like month or so, they laid off my entire department. And all of a sudden now I'm going from just being like a coordinator in the construction department to like running the construction department and the projects. That was insane. But I was able to prove to myself that I could do so much more. So it was a little bit like this guy or this accountant, his name was Ted. It was a little bit like what Ted saw in me. But again, I didn't quite trust. And so it was like I had the fork, right? I finished school. No. So like job and job and job. And then I got to a point, and he really did kind of lay it out for me, but there was still so much fear around, I don't know if I can do this. And so again, thinking that this is a perfect job, which yes, there was great things within it, and it brought just, so much more to who I was, and, trust in myself, that then I got laid off from that job because once all the construction projects that were going on when I was first hired were done, then they basically like took construction from in-house to out and stuff. So I was laid off at that point. And then I started my first business. And so I took Ted's advice and I took what I was really good at. And that business grew and, very, very quickly without a lot of hard work because it was so beautifully aligned to my gifts. And so I did, a little bit like what he had tried to direct me, the gifts that he saw in me. And I continued that business until I got pregnant with my first child and then had some complications. And then after having him and thought, okay, this doesn't quite work. And so I actually then started another business that allowed me to stay home more, which was ultimately my goal. I always wanted to have kids and kind of be there, but I also knew I couldn't just be a stay-at-home mom. So I knew it wasn't in me. Like I always joke and say too, once I retire, like actually like retire one day, I don't think I'll ever retire. I'll always still do something because like I need it for my sanity. So from there, I started another business and that allowed me to stay home. And I had clients still from the first business that stayed with me, even after I then had my second child, still had a few that stayed with me, until ultimately I kind of worked out of that and into the other, which was just super creative. And I grew that business beautifully until I suffered a brain injury, which that was my cosmic 2x4, honestly. That was the universe's way of saying that, like, well, I was on the right path. There was other things within my personal life that needed to change, essentially. So yeah. And so, but then time came and so many people, they said to me, why didn't you go back to that business? Logically, it would have made sense, but it also didn't. It didn't make sense because I knew, right? Like I had built this beautiful, successful business. I had made a massive name for myself. Yes, I suffered an injury and I focused on healing. Logically, starting, that business, getting it going again would make sense. I built so much around that, but I just knew it wasn't right. I knew, well, that made the most sense. I knew that I was being called to something so much more. And again, like the cosmic 2x4, like I was literally hit in the back of the head. So I joke that I joke about it now. Actually, I was on somebody's podcast and called it was my holy shit moment. And, but it's brought me here, right? And so it's all these bits and pieces that happen. So I love how you said that because it just, and I wanted to share that because maybe there's people who are listening and either they're not feeling confident and they're like, I really want to start a business, but then they take that the safer choice, right? The one that makes maybe more sense because of the money, and they don't do it right away. Or maybe there's other people who did do that and they're sitting there going, am I crazy? Am I crazy that I turned down that opportunity because I'm following like my soul? It doesn't make sense, but I've realized that the what doesn't make sense is honestly the thing that usually does make the most sense.
Yeah, depending. I mean, I think when I think there are two big parts to this that I see, and I think when I decided to go full time with coaching, it wasn't my first business. I had three others that I had done on the side of my professional career. And that's what gave me the confidence to jump into full time. I was like, okay, I've made two successful businesses out of the three. I know what it takes to stand this up. I can do this. Now, I was still naive. Like, I still trusted certain people that I shouldn't have. I hired coaches that ended up just projecting and telling me what to do, which part of me wanted that because I kind of wanted someone to tell me what to do, but at the same time, that never typically works out. Like, caveat, if you're looking for a coach, make sure they're asking you a lot of questions so they know how to properly guide you. And I also got certified as a coach. And I think talking, to those self-trust moments, those are really important. And me getting certified as a coach was a huge self-trust moment because I felt like, I'm not just calling myself a coach here. I know what I'm doing, trained by Berkeley. And that validation, even though a lot of clients don't really care if I'm certified, that really helped me feel more confident. Um, so I think for listeners, it's like, what do you need to develop that self trust? Because the more self trust we have in what we're building and the path that we're taking, the more successful we're going to be. And I will like add a caveat note here too, is that I've worked with founders at all different levels, like just starting out, six figures, even 7 and 8 figures. Fear is the number one thing that comes up in coaching because we can't escape it. It's always going to be a factor. Our lives are always going to continue to evolve with different contexts and different landscapes that we're making decisions from. So I just want to validate people that fear is real and look for areas where you can find self-trust.
Yeah, you're so right. And you're right about that it doesn't matter where you're at because it seems like every new level there's that newer thing that you need to step into, right?
Yeah.
So, I find it with even people around money. It doesn't matter whether they're making $50,000 or $50 million. People can still hold some of the same money stories and money blocks and all of that, right? That we
Oh
can
yeah.
have. And so you think to yourself, well, when I hit this income level, then it just comes in a different way. So yeah, there's so much. But I love how you said that you too have had tons of businesses because I think one of the things that's definitely happened, and I've noticed it in the last year or so, there's this massive fatigue with a lot of people around the coaches and the coaching industry, especially business coaches. There's a lot of people who help people, and I'm not blanket statement or here or anything like that, but there's a lot of people who don't truly have the experience and the background behind them to be guiding other people. Just because you've launched one business and just, because we all don't do it the same way. And so like you're right, you've got to really dig in, you've got to find, ask the questions, go deep with the person that you're working with and stuff. And so a lot of people I find they've worked with, like you and I both said, right? You got into something or you work with a coach and it didn't go the best way. And now you hold fear about, okay, well, I don't want to work with another. Like I don't want to risk taking, being burned again by somebody else or something like that, right? Like there's just that
Yeah.
whole other layer that's coming into it that, yeah, like trusting yourself after you've been in that space, right? Trusting yourself. Because that's what it comes down to. We can't say that, well, I'm going to trust in this, coach or mentor or person that I'm working with, because ultimately, like the trust needs to be within you to know, like, and if you make the mistake, like that's okay. Like we learn through all
Yeah.
of that, right? And it is there's a saying, and I never get it right. And I always think to myself, I need to look it up. But essentially, that entrepreneurship is like learning to fly the plane at the same time you're building the plane.
Right.
So you know, we're all, even somebody like myself, who my education was this, and then, 20 years of experience before jumping into doing, different, it doesn't make a difference. Like there's just newer levels and newer layers, and we just, we're always expanding. Like it is the biggest way that we grow and learn and expand, by jumping into starting a business.
Yeah, and I mean, I've made massive mistakes too of hiring the wrong coach, and it's really hard. It's not like there's a magic checklist that says, okay, if these three things are a check mark, then this person's a right fit for you. I think again, like our psychological frameworks make up so much of this because if we have a pattern and we meet some coach that maybe speaks to us and that pattern that we hold, then we could get caught up and believe them and believe every word that comes out of their mouth and think, okay, they're going to change my life. And then they don't. And we feel disappointed. But again, it's like, it's not entirely your fault, right? Some of this is just like pure psychology at play between the two of you. And again, you can see it as one of those detours that taught you a lesson. Okay, what are you learning from that? What are you taking with you so that maybe you don't fall into that pattern again? Because what I find is that all relationships, business relationships, as well as personal, they tend to mirror each other. So I have learned from the coaches I've hired that were not a good fit. And I've also found coaches that have changed my life for the better as a person, as a woman, and as a business owner. And as a coach, that's really saying something. And I think the fatigue that I noticed are just with people who have hired the wrong people. But there are life changing coaches out there. It's just, do those coaches actually listen to you? Do they ask you powerful questions that open new doors in your mind and see things differently? Because those are the indicators that I look for in a coach. Because again, I think entrepreneurship, like you were saying, you're building the plane while you're flying it. We don't know everything. It's impossible to, and there's no perfect business.
Yeah.
So, how do you figure out what is right for you? A lot of times that's going to come in the form of connecting with other people, whether it's a coach or a community.
Yeah, that's exactly. We learn through relationships, right? It's how we learn so much more about ourselves. And you're right. Like, and it's all relationships. Everything is all intermingled. I always tell everybody it's your physical, your emotional, your mental, and your spiritual is all interlaced. And then as business owners, our personal life is interlaced with our business. Like they are so tied. And so it only makes sense that you would have things in your personal life that might mirror into your business and vice versa, and all of the things. So again, it's why the development and the growth that we can experience through this is huge. And I think it's one of the ways that, like, one of the craziest and fastest ways that you can really jump into it is through saying, I'm gonna launch a business.
Yeah.
So and then
I mean,
keep going at it.
my right. And sticking to it, committing to it
Yeah.
is the hardest part. My podcast, that's why I named it Confessions of a Spiritual Entrepreneur, because I think entrepreneurship is a spiritual path. You're constantly facing challenges and growing.
Yeah, it is the perfect, when I saw that or whatever, I'm like, that is the perfect name. So it is, because you're right. And I think too, there's so many of these things. So one of the things that I found, and again, you're right, like there's no way to know if a coach is good or bad or right or wrong for you or anything like that. One thing I've realized is not rushing into it, like not being kind of sucked in by really good like marketing and a lot of glitz and all of that kind of stuff. It's really taking the time and in some cases even doing the research, like having the ability to, connect with the person. And usually, like somebody good, they're going to be willing to hop on a call with you or chat with you a little bit in DMs or something like that before,
Oh, yeah.
expecting you to just jump into a huge investment and stuff with them, right? So
Yeah.
it's that kind of deal. If it's this, you must do it right now, or that's where because sometimes it's that pressure, and I know those were perfect. I mean, you in the marketing, right? Like at one point, that was the perfect way of doing marketing, but it seems that also that people have caught on to that maybe a little bit, right? That the pressure tactic is not really working as well. That's at least what I've seen people say. So I would love your take on that, especially too. Marketing, I remember doing a transformational. So when you do transformational work, like a marketing program kind of around that, because it is a little bit different, right? There's the traditional marketing that is in every industry and stuff, but in this one, it seems slightly different. So I would love to know maybe a little bit of your take kind of on that. And if there's been, especially because some of, what's kind of happened in the coaching industry and a lot of the coaching burnout and everything like that, if you've realized or noticed anything there.
I have so much to say about this. This could be an entire podcast episode. So I don't believe in anything called traditional marketing. I think marketing is marketing. It was in my undergrad. I've done it for years. I've worked with hundreds of people, hundreds of businesses on their marketing, and it's always going to be individualized. So if someone says, hey, here's a playbook from step 1 to step 100, and then you're going to make $1 million, guess what? Don't trust that person because that
Ah,
playbook may have worked for them, but it does not mean that's going to work for you. I see a lot of bad marketing advice on social media all the time. Again, I see people that have built impressive companies and have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they are known for business advice and even for, marketing, social media, fill in the blank. And even the way they describe certain things are incorrect. And I think when we boil it all down, what you need to know is that marketing connects you, your business, to the people that you serve. That channel can take many different forms. And you don't need social media. You don't need ads. You don't need a community if it's not right for you, right? I believe marketing should always feel super, super aligned. So before you start making marketing decisions, you want to go inward as a business owner and as a business and dive into, okay, what is your real identity? Who are the people that you really affect? And understanding, again, that relationship, because that's going to inform how you should be doing marketing, what it should look and sound like. Um, that's where creativity comes in too, and see, okay, what are new ways we can reach these people? And I think all of this is built on psychology at the end of the day. The more you understand yourself and the more you understand your people, again, it's that relationship. So I could go on from there, but let me know if you have any questions after that
oh
rant.
gosh, you're right. We totally could have an entire episode just on that because there is so much. So I love how you kind of confirmed for me that like there's no one way because it's something that I've really felt. So thank you for that. And I hope that everybody listening as well too. Because I mean I see it. Like it seems that for whatever reason my meta algorithm is just like every single business marketing expert, coach, business, whatever is like all about I cracked the code, this is the method, blah blah blah. And get this freebie, get this free course, or even, something super, super low ticket. And so you think to yourself, well, it's only like 10, or I saw something the other day for $7. And you think it's only $7. But then I realized, and I was like, I was like, ooh, because if you do that, and again, that's their way, right? And it doesn't mean that it's going to work for me. And yeah, it's not a huge outlay. It's not like spending 10 or $20,000 on getting into a business mastermind that wasn't the best thing for you. It's only $7. So you look at it and you think to yourself, but look at the time that maybe you go through the videos and then you start to implement it and you put all the things into your business and then you realize it didn't work, right? And so the time that you wasted and that time then equates to possible income that could have been flowing into your business had you stayed on maybe the right path that you were on and stuff. So one of the things that like myself that I've noticed lately is because social media is just this whole beast right now. And nobody seems to be able to keep up with the algorithm. And I personally, no offense to the social media experts out there, but I don't even think that they really truly know because like they'll share something and then I think to myself and you see and I'm like, but that's not what's happening. um, is about like I just show up how I want to show up and share what I want to share and don't post based on the algorithm. Don't post based on the, don't even follow the trends or anything like that. It's just, and when I just am me, those posts always seem to do incredibly well. And so I think that there's something there to it as well too, right? Because I'm an energetic alignment. And so if I'm an energetic alignment to me, and that's how then I'm showing up, then that's coming across out there. Whereas if I'm trying to force some other method or something like that. So I had actually in this marketing thing all about doing, if you do transformational, spiritual, type work, it was that a lot of your focus should be like, how do you find people? Like, what is the thing that grabs you? So if you see somebody sharing, something, what makes you say, I'm going to go to that website. I'm going to check into their stuff more. I'm going to, buy into their program or grab their freebie or buy their product. And like there's something in that there's something in that you should then be utilizing because there's just, like there's an alignment thing to that. So, but like you said, I mean, we could do a whole episode on this, but I feel, I know for myself at least, like I am always open and transparent. Marketing is not my strong suit, like at all. Supposed to be good at sales, and I know when I get and I, talking with whatever, but marketing, I'm just like, I feel I'm like I am not good at it at all. So again, I learned because I tried all these things and did all and stuff that it's just if I just be me and just show up like that. And like you said too, know what it is that I do, who it is that I help. That's kind of where I put my focus.
Yeah, and I think you're speaking to something. So there are energetics to marketing, and I think that's something that most people don't realize. And that's what I've been able to discover through, again, this kind of two world space that I've been living in for the last, I don't know, 15 plus years. And what you're speaking to when you feel something, you feel called to post, and then that thing does well, that's because there's an energetic frequency there. There's a match. Right. You're sharing something that feels like, ooh, something's coming up and I need to share this. That's probably because somewhere someone is looking for that. And so you're feeling that pull because of that. And then the same thing when you say, I notice what I'm drawn to, and then I emulate that. Same thing. That's because of the energetics. You're drawn to something, so that frequency works for you. Meaning, if you share that, that frequency is going to work for your people because we tend to attract different types. So, human design, for instance, I'm a 1-3, so I tend to attract threes and fives based on my profile. And that's often the case, is like you can actually look at the types of people that are going to be drawn to you and then use that to inform your marketing. So that's like the energetic side that I think is not talked about.
Yes, and you're right about that. Like I remember doing a whole deep dive, right? I mean, learning my human design and then going into that and then, learning about my messaging and all of that kind of stuff or whatever too. Like it was a whole other layer and I remember at one point being like, "Oh my gosh." Over super overwhelming. And that's the thing too is we can absorb so much information around just business in general. But, definitely around marketing. So, but I love how you said, especially with all the experience and everything like that, that the energetics is a really, really big part of it because as spiritual entrepreneurs, the energetics is our main focus. Like it's 20%, or sorry, it's 80%. The strategy is like 20%, or in some cases even less, and stuff. So it's like pulling away from the strategy of business and focusing more on the energetics and then starting to see what shifts and starting to see the flow and all of that stuff and attracting and everything. So, because when we're energetically aligned, it just does really open up.
Yeah, success is inevitable, in my opinion, when we can tap into our intuition, stay really
Yeah.
grounded with that, and then follow that alignment because that's how you know the alignment's correct. If you're not
Yeah.
grounded, then what can feel like alignment is actually just your ego pushing you off course.
Yes, which we
It
both talked about. I mean,
happens.
It
Yeah.
happens. It happens for sure. So a lot of the work that I do with people is around like their soul's blueprint. And so what is alignment for them? And that's exactly, it's like if things are working, you're on the right path. Like
Right.
that's, because there is that energetic flow that happens. So, and within that too, it's understanding that we all have this beautiful unique blueprint and strategies and systems and processes and how we market and how we sell and all of this stuff is different for each of us. So, it's not the matter of just following the system and you're going to have success. That could have worked amazing. That person could have been able to get, a seven figure, eight figure plus multiple seven figure businesses. But that doesn't mean that that's just going to automatically equate to it working for you. And so if somebody, goes down that path and then thinks, what? I mean, one of the first things that we do, especially as women, is, oh gosh, like what's wrong with me? Like, am I not good enough? Am I not worthy of that? Like, we go into the whole, if it doesn't happen and doesn't happen easily, because that's the other thing too. It seemed like there was this, constant where if you just do this, you're going to have this too, right? And all these people who tried that, and then it did not happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we really could talk for so long.
I know.
I think you just have so much wisdom that I think so many people need. So I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing all of this with everybody. Obviously, I'm going to have all of the details on you and your how to get in contact with you and everything like that in the description box for everybody. But if you also want to share, so if there's people who are listening and like right now they want to just be able to go say, I need to find her because she is like speaking my language and I know, trust that. If you're feeling the pull, trust that pull. But yeah, just share right now, what's the easiest way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. You've been such a kind host, and I really enjoyed this conversation. People can find me on Instagram at samantha.fackler. You can find all my links and stuff at samanthafackler.com. I have a community that's free for women entrepreneurs. We hold different circles where I'll be kind of channeling what's coming up for the group in that. So those are really fun. And then I also hold office hours, and that's called Headquarters. And you can find that on my website too.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you again. And yeah, maybe I'll have to have you on again sometime.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
happy
well,
to.
thank you. And thank you to everybody who listened. Until next time.